All right, guys, so we've covered a lot of the fundamentals of JavaScript and how to work with the document object model and events and so on. Now I want to start to get into asynchronous JavaScript. And by the way, events are asynchronous. But before we do that, I want you to understand how JavaScript actually works and understand that at its core, JavaScript is synchronous, and it's also what we call single-threaded. Now, when I say synchronous, I mean that everything happens one at a time. So each line of code is executed one at a time, and the line before has to be done before the next one starts. Now, it does this on what we call a single thread of execution. And like I said, JavaScript does have asynchronous capabilities, such as specific web APIs, but it's not asynchronous in nature or intrinsically. So when it comes to understanding the thread of execution, you already have a leg up on some of this stuff because you know about the execution context. We talked about that earlier in the course. And the execution context contains the currently running code and everything that aids in its execution. And it runs on what we call the thread of execution. And that's a single thread. And you can think of a thread sort of like a process. And it runs one line of code at a time. Now, some languages do have multiple threads and can run multiple threads or processes at the same time. JavaScript does not by default. There are something called service workers, but that's a bit beyond what I want to get into right now. So if you look at this image, it shows the thread of execution, which is a single sequential flow of control. And each operation, no matter what that is, in this case we're just doing console logs, the second console log can only happen once the first is done. The third can only happen once the second is done, and so on. So it's very, very simple at its core when you talk about the core JavaScript engine and how that works. Okay, the thread also includes the call stack and memory heap, which we've already talked about in past videos. So that's what I really want you to understand up to this point, is that everything is executed line by line, and JavaScript is synchronous at its core. Now, in the next video, I'm going to explain some of the asynchronous concepts and some of the things that can help us write asynchronous code within the browser or even within Node.js, which is a JavaScript runtime. Okay, so we'll look at that next.